It's estimated that hundreds of people, perhaps even more, disappear every day around the world. This includes young people, adults, the elderly, and even children. Many of these missing individuals are eventually declared dead in absentia, but the circumstances and dates of their deaths remain a mystery. Some of these people may have been subjected to enforced disappearance, but in some cases, there is not enough information about their fate. Here are some of the most eerie and mysterious disappearances that defy any explanation. Who's D.B. Cooper? On November 24, 1971, D.B. Cooper hijacked a Boeing 727 and successfully extorted a $200,000 ransom from the U.S. government. Then he got the money, and as the plane flew over Washington state, he drank whiskey, smoked a cigarette, and parachuted out of a flying airplane. In a strange way, Cooper just vanished. To this day, no one is sure who he really was. Cooper's case is the only airplane hijacking in U.S. history that remains unsolved. Here's an interesting fact: the ransom money was never used. In 1980, a boy on vacation with his family in Oregon found several bags of money identified by serial number, which led to another search for Cooper, or at least his remains. Nothing was found, though. A little later, in 2017, a parachute strap was found at one of Cooper's possible landing sites. Dunbar's switch. In 1912, a 4-year-old boy named Bobby Dunbar went missing on a family trip. After 8 months, he was found, and the boy was reunited with his family. But here's the strange part. A DNA test of his descendants showed that the child reunited with the Dunbar family wasn't Bobby. It was a boy named Charles Bruce Anderson, who only looked like Bobby. So, what happened to the real Bobby Dunbar? Louie's mystery. Louie LaPrince was a talented inventor and a pioneer in filmmaking. His name is not so well known these days. All the fame and recognition went to Thomas Edison, who was recognized for this invention just after Louie disappeared. Was Edison, who sought to be the first to patent the invention, to blame for Louis's disappearance? It seems unlikely. Louie disappeared without a trace in September 1890. The inventor had gone to visit his brother in Dijon, France, and then returned to Paris by train. When the train arrived in Paris, Louie did not want to get off. The conductor went into Louis's compartment to escort him out. But when the conductor opened the door, Louie and his luggage were gone. Furthermore, the train did not stop between Dijon and Paris. The version that Louie could have jumped out of the window of his compartment is not confirmed, as the windows were locked from the inside. The police scoured the area between Dijon and Paris, but could not find Louie. It was as if he just vanished. There's another possibility that the police never considered, that Louie never got on the train at all. This is about money and family relations. Louis's brother Albert drove him to the train station. It's possible Albert lied and killed his brother for money and inheritance, but we'll probably never know. In 1928, Albert's grandson told historian Georges Patanier that Louie wanted to commit suicide on the verge of bankruptcy. Maybe so, but there are more questions than answers. A ghost blimp. In August 1942, a naval airship named L-8, Flight 101, took off from Treasure Island in the Bay Area to detect submarines. The crew consisted of 2 people. The pilots were 27-year-old Ernest Cody and 32-year-old Charles Adams. Both were experienced pilots, but for Adams, it was his first time flying a small airship like the L-8. About an hour and a half after takeoff at 7:38, Lieutenant Cody radioed squadron headquarters at Moffett Field. He said he was 3 miles east of the Farallon Islands. 4 minutes later, he called again to say he was investigating a suspicious oil slick, but then the signal was lost. After radio silence for several hours, the blimp suddenly returned to land and crashed into a house in Daly City. Everything on board was in order, and no emergency gear was used. You might be wondering about the pilots. The pilots vanished without a trace. They were never found. Just minutes later, officials from Daly City arrived on the scene and discovered that the airship's gel bag was leaking and the 2 men on board were missing. A search of the gondola left investigators scratching their heads. The door was locked, which was very unusual in flight. The security arc was no longer in place. A microphone connected to an external speaker was hanging outside the gondola, and the ignition and radio switches were still on. Cody's hat and briefcase, which contained classified documents, were still in place. But missing were 2 life jackets. A Navy investigation found that the airship was seen by several ships and airplanes between 7 and 11 a.m. on the day of the incident. Some people were close enough to see the pilots inside, but no one saw them fall from the ship. The airship soon became known as the Ghost Airship because people disappeared without any explanation. On August 17, 1943, it was officially acknowledged that both pilots had died. Oh, that Australia. Prabdeep Sroun is a Canadian military reservist who disappeared in May 2013 while hiking in Australia. Yes, our favorite and mysterious Australia. The man parked his rented camper and hiked along the main ridge in Kosciuszko National Park. Soon a park employee called the police. He noticed that Prabdeep's vehicle hadn't moved in almost a week, even though he only had a 24-hour parking ticket. What makes this case even stranger is that 2 park rangers heard a voice that sounded like a cry for help coming from the same spot where the man disappeared. Despite this info, the searchers haven't been able to find the guy. We still don't know where the voice came from or who it belonged to. Who took the boy? In his book Missing 411, author David Paulides dives into the mysterious case of Damien Mackenzie. Mackenzie was a 10-year-old boy who went missing on September 4, 1974, while hiking in Victoria Falls with 40 other students. The group was on their way to the top of the falls when one of the kids on the hike noticed that Damien had left. The searchers followed Damien's footprints all the way up one side of the falls, but the track suddenly stopped, as if someone had grabbed Damien and dragged him away. There were no suspicious people in the area, and the bloodhound dogs couldn't find any scent trails. The missing boy was never found, as if Damien had suddenly teleported away, leaving an unfinished trail of his boots. Beyond being, do you remember a farmer named David Lang who went missing? I've talked about him in my past videos. On September 23, 1880, he literally disappeared in front of his family and friends. He was walking toward them across a field, greeting them and waving as he suddenly just disappeared. They searched for him for months, but never found anything. The family was understandably shaken. Despite the tragedy that had befallen the family, Mrs. Lang was determined not to give up until her husband was found. Friends, I recently came across some new information about this case. It turns out that 7 months later, while their daughter was playing in the yard, she heard her father calling for help. The daughter ran to where she heard her father's call for help, but found only a patch of dead grass in the spot where he was last seen. She called out to her mother, who immediately came to her. She too saw the circle of dead grass, but heard no more of her husband's screams. This frightened her so much that she decided to move with her family to another town. How the Lang family was doing after the move remains unknown. A call out of nowhere. This story took place in the city of Marshall, Minnesota. On May 14, 2008, at midnight, 19-year-old Brandon Swanson was driving his car home after the holiday was over. He had just completed another year of college and was celebrating the end of the spring semester with his fellow students. Around 2 a.m., Brandon lost control of his car and ended up in a ditch. Fortunately, he was unhurt, got out of the car, and called his parents on his cell phone. He didn't know exactly where he was, so he told his parents that he thought he was near the town of Lind. Naturally, the concerned parents immediately got up from their seats and drove to their son's car to take him home. However, upon arriving at the location, they could not find him. They flashed their headlights to signal Brandon when they approached the place he had described. But Brandon did not notice the light and turned on the headlights himself. However, his parents did not notice the headlights either. It became clear that the two parties were in different locations. Brandon said on the phone that he got out of the car and was going to go to what he thought were the city lights. He was on the phone for quite some time until, after 45 minutes, he abruptly terminated the conversation by saying, "Oh shit."
Oh shit!
A short time later, his car was found abandoned in the very ditch he was describing. What's interesting is that there wasn't a town in the area where he walked. He hasn't been seen or heard from since then. This case is still unsolved. Missing in a bar. Brian Schaffer, a medical student at Ohio State University, was out that evening with friends. Later that evening, they lost track of him in the bar. They figured he either decided to head home or, as it happened, picked up a girl and left with her without saying a word to his friends. But when he never showed up or called, they contacted the authorities. The police launched an investigation. Surveillance cameras at the bar showed that Brian came in that night but never left. It's a pretty dark story, and it's not clear if it will ever be solved. Some think that the missing student may have been killed by a known criminal nicknamed the Smiley Killer. Please leave your thoughts about these strange cases in the comments below this video. Subscribe to the channel and give this video a like. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.